You're listening to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast, episode 242. Welcome to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. I'm your host, Paula Price, lawyer turned certified executive coach. This podcast was created to empower women lawyers just like you to create a life and practice you love. Join me every week for a break from the hustle so we can focus on you, what you truly want, and how you can create it. If you're over the overwhelm, done with putting out fires, and ready to redefine success on your own terms, you're in the right place. Ready for today's episode? Let's dive in. Happy New Year. Welcome back to the podcast, and I hope that 2026 is off to a brilliant start for you. This is the first podcast episode that's going live, and I'm excited, and I hope you're excited. The new year is such a great time. We all walk into it with a clean slate, a fresh start, and the opportunities always feel so great and exciting, and I'm delighted to have you here with me today. I hope your 2025 wrapped up beautifully. I hope you had an amazing holiday. I hope you had time with family and with friends. And I'm just really excited for us to embark on another year together. So welcome. Today we are talking about the billable hour. And I'm excited for this conversation, and I'm excited for you, because this is a time to focus. We are going to spend time together planning. We are going to be strategic about how you're going to approach your billable target this year. Now, the reason that I felt compelled to record this episode is because at the end of every calendar year, so starting sometimes in November, sometimes in December, I'll speak with lawyers who are looking at their end of year, and they know they're facing a very heavy workload in order to meet their target. And if that was you last year and you're listening because you want to avoid doing that again this year, you're 100% in the right place. And the reason that I want to share tips and strategies with you is because I know that you can get ahead if that's what you want. I know that you can meet your target. And I think that having a plan in place where you're having your hours accrue on a consistent basis, where maybe you're even getting ahead of target, can bring ease and peace of mind as you go through your practice. I know billable hours can be something that really feels stressful. And so I want to help manage that stress by giving you some strategies, some tools to help you to keep pace over the year so that by the end of the year, you're feeling really confident. You're not necessarily having to skip out on holiday parties or leave early or feel that sense of dread or stress because you're just kind of hitting that final hour on December 31st or whatever that might look like for you. So with that, we are going to cover a number of points. I've got 6 points altogether. Now, if you are a lawyer who is recording their time, you are, of course, in the right place. And even if you're regularly hitting your target and you're doing that comfortably, I'm hoping that today's episode gives you some tips and tricks, gives you some new tools, and provides value for you. And if you regularly struggle with this, again, I hope that this really does serve you and that what you walk away with is a set of new tangible skills that can help you get ahead of your hours. Now, if you yourself are not recording time, but you know someone who is and you want to support them, please do share this episode with them. If you are the director of professional development at your law firm and you're trying to support your lawyers in them recording their time, then I can also support you. I can support your lawyers. I would be delighted to come in and speak about this topic at your firm. It's something that I feel really passionately about. I love speaking about and sharing. So that could be time management more generally. It could be talking about timekeeping more specifically. If you have lawyers in particular that could use my support as their coach, I love doing one-to-one coaching work with lawyers, and I can help with time management. So all of this is very near and dear to my heart, and I would love to support you in whatever way would best serve you. So with that being said, let's dive into step number 1. And step number one is foundational, and it is to simply decide, right? You have a choice to make at the beginning of the year, which is, do you want to meet your target? Now, I'm going to assume that if you have signed into this episode, you are listening and you're still listening. You are interested in meeting your target, and that the answer to that question is yes. Yes, you do want to meet your target. And assuming that is the answer, I would love for you to explore the reasons why that is important to you. Now, it may be important because that is what you've agreed to do as one of the terms of your employment at your firm, is to meet your target. Maybe you're a partner and you're thinking it's important for you to set an example for others. Maybe you're really committed to that idea of hitting target. You might be really goal oriented. I know I am. I love having a target I then meet. I get a lot of satisfaction out of that. It might mean looking more deeply at what this means to you. So it could be the substantive nature of what you're doing through those hours, right? The contributions you're making, the way that you're serving your clients. It's a reflection of the fact that you've got great, challenging, interesting work that you're doing. It could be that this is a stepping stone. You might be on your way to partnership, and meeting your target is one of the preconditions to your application being entertained and considered. And so you want to think about what's important to you about meeting your target, because that's the reason that is going to compel you forward. And that reason is different for everybody. And there's not a right reason. There's not a wrong reason. But as you go through the year, when you face challenges, which you inevitably will, if you can come back to that commitment and tell yourself, this is what I want, this is what I told myself I would do, I'm committed to this because, then it just brings you back. It helps you focus. It helps you feel motivated once again, even when things become challenging. So that really is step one, is making the decision, making the commitment to meet or exceed your billable target. And for some of you, that's the baseline, right? You want your target, and that's the goal. For some of you, the goal may be you want to hit higher than target. And I work with lawyers who routinely will bill in excess of their target. They love that. They want that. And so for every person, it's going to be different. Now, if you are not committed to meeting your billable targets, that is also something that can happen. And that, I would say, is a topic for a different podcast episode, a different conversation. But I just want to acknowledge that for some of you, that might not be what you want. And so there is space for that. Today's episode is really focused on the lawyer who has said yes. They want to meet their target. And so the steps that follow are going to help get you there. So the next step, step two, is to do the math. Now, forgive me, because I know that you are plenty capable of doing all of the math. And I'm not doing this step because I don't think that you can do the math on your own. I know you can do the math on your own, and chances are you have done the math on your own year after year, as many years as you've been billing and recording and all of it. So I know you're familiar with the numbers. And what I'd also like to offer is that doing the math is really eye-opening, and what it can reveal is just the nature of discipline and focus and planning and strategizing that are all required in order for you to meet your target. So if you take a target, a notional number, you know what your target is, and so you can do the math by taking that number and dividing it by 12, the number of months in a calendar year. And that's typically where I started when I was practicing as a lawyer and I needed to meet my target. I would just look at, like, what do I need each month? And I like having that as a benchmark, just because then you know roughly if you're on track. Now, what that also means, though, I mean, it's one number, but it's also not necessarily the case that you're going to consistently produce that number of hours every month. There will be months where you're over, and there are going to be months where you're under. And if you take that number, for example, and you were to divide it by the number of days in a week, right? Maybe work days, you might get another number, right? An average, but that average would not necessarily take into account time that you take off, right? If you were to say, okay, I'm going to take the number, I'm going to divide it by 52 weeks in a calendar year, and I'm going to divide it by 5 because that's the number of days that I typically work in the office, you will get a number. But what I would encourage you to do is to also do the math where you start to play with variables. where you factor in statutory vacation. So figure out how many stat vacation days there are in your jurisdiction. What are those going to be? Because those are days where likely you're not in the office. And vacation time. Do you plan to take time off? How many days do you plan to take time off? Do you have kids? And can you expect that they're going to be sick and have professional days and the nanny's not going to show up and you're going to need some extra days to be flexible there? Do you have professional development commitments that you already know, right? You're going to be at a conference for a few days. You're teaching somewhere. So you want to get really honest with yourself about how much time during a work week, how many days are not going to be spent working. And then you want to do the math a few times to see what your daily average would work out to. And the reason you want a daily average isn't so much that you're going to hit that target every day, but notionally, you know what you need to meet. So what is likely going to happen in real life is there will be days where you exceed that number and there will be days where you're well under that number. And the goal is to be monitoring and tracking so that you know where you stand at any given time and you have a notional daily target that will allow you to reach your goal at the end of the year, factoring in that there will be time off. There will be days you're not at work. So that's your first thing is you want to do your math. You want to reach a certain number. Now, the other math exercise that I'd encourage you to do is to look at a day in the calendar. And what I'd invite you to think of is picture in your mind an Outlook calendar or similar where there's a time slot for each hour in the day, right? So the hours from 8 to 9 to 10, etc. Because that's your starting point. The hours that you bill need to fit notionally on a calendar. I'm going to share a personal anecdote that I'm hoping will help anchor this idea in your mind. When my husband and I were expecting our first child, we attended a birthing class, and it was all about how to go through childbirth. It was interesting. I learned a ton. And one of the exercises we were taken through was at the very end. So after we learned all the wonderful things that happen or that could happen when you're giving birth to a child, yes, you can use your imagination. You may not have to. The baby is in your hands and you're a new parent. And if you've never been the parent of a child before, a new baby, there's a lot of sleeping, changing, sleeping, feeding, you name it. And so what the instructor did was she made us look at a timeline. It was literally a piece of paper with 24 1-hour slots on it. And then she gave us 24 corresponding little pieces of activities to slot onto that timeline. So things like feeding the baby, napping, changing the baby, those things that you can expect. And then we had to take 24 of those 1-hour time blocks and put them onto this 24-hour timeline, right? So you can imagine what that looked like. There was some cardboard cutouts, whatever. And so at the end of that exercise, it was very clear to us, my husband and me, what our days would look like. And it was so sobering that my husband turned to me and said, there's no way we can do this on our own. We must move in with my parents when the baby arrives. Now, I'm a private person. I was not ready to move in with his parents. So we talked about that and decided that no, actually we would stay at our apartment at the time and we would do it that way. And it worked out just fine. But you can imagine how sobering that felt. And part of it, I think, in hindsight is that time isn't something that we typically see, right? It's so fluid. It kind of ticks by. So when you have a visual representation, it's very sobering, right? And so the same can be true when you look at the calendar, a day in the life of a lawyer. And let's say you had those notional 1-hour blocks and you were trying to add your billable hours up to 7 hours or 8 hours or 6 hours or however many hours you have as your daily target. You'll see that once you factor in start time, end time, a lunch break, a coffee break, a conversation with a friend, transitioning from one file to the next, some non-billable activities you need to do in a day, you start to see how it eats into your day. And the exercise that I would love for you to do, and if we work together, I will do this with you, is to figure out realistically on a routine calendar day, how do you actually fit those hours into your day so that at the end of it, you're able to record the number of hours that you need to meet each day. So I know that was a long explanation, but I think it really drives home the point that the hours need to come from somewhere, and that is going to be on your calendar. So how are we going to make that work? Now, the final thing I'll say here in the math department is that, yes, we've talked about averages, but I want you to think about your practice in the fluidity and the cadence and the rhythms of you and your practice. So I like to front load. I like things to be done in advance. So when I was a lawyer recording time, I liked to work really, really hard. January, February, March, April. I liked to front load my workday. I liked to get into the office really, really early so that my billable hours had largely accrued by the time I went for lunch. To me, that is a cadence that feels good to me. Now for you, you might have a different type of cadence, right? You have a different working style, but I would love for you to think about what works for you and what strategy is going to work for you in your practice. Your practice might be really cyclical, right? You might have really busy periods and really slow periods. And so you want to know how you're going to strategically use your cycles to make sure that you're meeting, on average, the target that you want to meet. You might think about how you plan your weeks. Do you have days where maybe you stay longer, right? You might know that Monday is a slower day for you, that you're likely to record fewer hours because there's more admin that day as you get into the office, figure out what's on your calendar, deal with some admin tasks. But a Thursday might be a day where you have more billable hours because you stay longer, you want to get things done before the end of the week, you don't want to leave until Friday, etc. So you want to be thinking about what is your cadence, what works for you, what your practice looks like. And so what is the flow that you can expect in terms of building up your hours? So that's your math. So we've decided step one, that you want to meet your target or a target that is potentially higher than your target, right? This is who I'm thinking about. And step two is the math. So what does that look like? How many hours do you need to bill in a day? What's the average that you're aiming for? And how are you going to fit those hours into your workday? So that brings us to step three. And this is a step that I'm not going to spend a lot of time on, but one that will take you some time if you do it fully. And that is to assess your practice, assess where you are right now. And I want you to assess your practice, so your work life, and also what's happening outside of work that supports you in your practice. So if you look at your practice as it is currently, do you have enough work that will allow you to meet your target comfortably? And if the answer is no, you don't have enough work, then we want to figure out how you're going to develop that sustainable workflow that will help you meet your target. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in a later section where we troubleshoot some of the anticipated challenges you might have. Workload is one of them, but there may be foundational elements of your practice that you need to develop in order to have the hours that would help you meet your target. So there I'm thinking in terms of the nature of your market, so your internal and external clients, the relationships you have there. Do you have sufficient and healthy relationships so that there is a steady flow of work? Is your practice allocated in terms of being flexible so that if it's really slow in one area, maybe you've got another area that will potentially be more busy? So, what does your practice look like in terms of complementarity? And also systems. And we'll talk about that more in a minute, but how are you managing your time? How are you managing your practice? So when you think about that current assessment, it's that honest evaluation of where you're at in your practice and are you generating enough work to create or to fulfill the billable target that you have. Now, the other piece of that is to ask yourself outside of work, right? In your personal life, do you have the supports in place that are required for you to do the work you need to do to meet your targets? And so if you're a parent of children who need care, that means you've got the childcare in place, right? That's a non-negotiable. If you have areas that are maybe flexible, right? Maybe you're doing all your own housework, but you think, you know what, I could have someone come in and help me with that. That would really free me up. There may be things that you're doing that are elective that maybe you choose not to do. Maybe it's certain committees that you sit on or certain social engagements that you've been kind of holding on to, but maybe you're not that interested in them anymore. So again, it's going to be looking at your life and being honest about whether you've set yourself up for success or if you need to make some changes. And that moves us on to step 4, which is your time management structures overall. So in some cases, not meeting target has nothing to do with your time management. there's been a genuine slowdown of the market and the work simply isn't there. But if it was there, you would be managing it in a way that feels good, that things are getting done on time. And so that can happen. And sometimes a lack of meeting target can be a byproduct or a symptom of an underlying problem with the way that you are managing your time. So if you were to come to me and ask me for help in managing your time, I would walk you through a number of different places where I would like for you to have systems in place so that your time, your practice are both being managed proactively in a way that you feel more in control, that there's consistency, even if your practice is busy and things come out of nowhere, etc. So the key elements here that I would invite you to focus on would be planning. So do you have a consistent way of planning your weeks, your days, taking a bit of a step back, your months, and an even bigger step back, your year and years? So we want you planning in advance for your practice. Right now, what we are doing in this episode is we are planning for your year. We're planning to help you meet your targets. And so planning is a key component of any time and practice management system. So we would want to look at that. We would want to look at how you're scheduling a workday. So there's a lot that you can gain by being strategic in how you structure or plan or schedule an individual workday. And when you're scheduling, what we're looking at are things like energy levels. We're looking at anchors in your day, things that happen routinely. We're looking at what needs to happen day to day, certain routine tasks like responding to emails. We're looking at interruptions and how to deal with them. We're looking at how to avoid distractions. So scheduling is really where the rubber hits the road, right? It's like the plan is in place, but scheduling is where you get into the nitty-gritty. So what are you doing there? We would look at prioritization. So if you want to meet target, that means we need to prioritize billable work over other things. So what are the other things that are competing? How do you want to deal with those things? Are there elements of your practice where you need to set boundaries? Are there elements where you want to delegate? So these are questions that I would be asking you and we would be working through together if we were helping you tighten up your time management and practice systems. Procrastination. So if you're human, chances are every once in a while you push something off. There's tasks that you dread. Maybe they're overwhelming. Maybe they're boring. Maybe they're tedious. You don't know where to start. Whatever the reason is, we all have areas where we may procrastinate. And so let's look at those and get some tools in place to support you so that you can initiate those tasks in the moment more fluidly. We also would want to talk about balance. And I use the term balance very loosely because that's what people often use when they talk about work-life balance or avoiding burnout or staying energized. And it's important. And it's last on my list, but it's not because it's least important. When you have these other pieces in place, when you're planning effectively, scheduling effectively, you've managed to sort through your priorities, you're delegating, you're setting boundaries, you're not procrastinating quite as much, naturally, you'll also have a more balanced life. You're going to feel a lot better. There's going to be less stress. Chances are you're building in more time for yourself. You can call it self-care time, whatever language resonates with you. But the idea here is to set yourself up sustainably so that you're productive and you're also enjoying your life. And so that is something we would also be looking at. So if you need support with that, or if you know somebody who you would like to support with that, by all means, reach out. I would love to share more about that with you and how I can support you. So for you, with or without my help, individually, what I'm encouraging you to think about is how are you doing in each of these boxes? Because that overall time management system, when it's all working smoothly, then you're also recording your time, right? We talked about scheduling and the things that happen routinely. If you're scheduling your day, where does timekeeping fit in? The act of actually entering your billable time into a system of sorts that is required in order for you to meet target, right? We all know that's kind of like not only do you have to do the work, but then you need to record it. So then we move on to step 5. So just to recap, we've committed. Yes, we want this goal. Step 2, we've done the math. Maybe we've done it a few different ways just to see what it is requiring of us over the course of the year. We've looked at your current practice, your life, and we're realistic, right? Is the goal that you have? Can you reach it based on what you've got happening right now, or do we need to make some changes? We've looked at your timekeeping specifically, right? Your time management. Do you have the structures in place to support you and to get your work done effectively? And then we look at step 5, which is problem solving. So you've got all this in place. You know what you want to do, but you also know that there are reasons why you struggle to hit target. And everybody is going to have a different challenge. If you don't have any challenges, that's amazing. But I'm going to perhaps, that is absolutely amazing. And I think that is absolutely doable. I think you've got a really robust practice and you've got lots of work coming in and you're recording regularly. Chances are you are ahead of the game. And so I do want to acknowledge that maybe you and to just kudos to you and to continue doing what you're doing, right? I think that's absolutely incredible. And so that is a wonderful skill. And hopefully it's one that people can learn from you, that you can help teach them if they are having challenges. Now, if you're not there, or even if you are there, but there are times where you find that you're slipping, chances are there's certain go-tos or challenges that you face specifically. So I've got a few of them here. I'm going to walk you through them. Number 1 is workflow. And we talked about this a little bit, but one of the biggest challenges that I think lawyers can face is the fact that they don't have the workflow to support their billable target. And to me, that's worse than having too much workflow. I've always felt more comfortable being a bit over capacity than any amount of under capacity. And I am still like that. I don't like being under capacity. It doesn't feel good to me. So for you want to think about workflow, and are there issues that happen over the course of your calendar year that affect your workflow? And sometimes it is cyclical, right? If you think about solicitors who do deals, your volume will depend on what's happening in the economy. And if it's a slow market, sometimes that means you are not working, and that can be really challenging. It can be really stressful. So are there ways that you can maybe find complements to your practice? Are there ways you can leverage those high points? What can you do in your practice in order for the effect of those cycles to be reduced on the number of hours that you are recording on your timesheets? For litigators, trials, right? You've got a trial, you're working for the trial, you've had to block everything off during a period of time. Sometimes it's a couple of days, sometimes it can be weeks, sometimes it's even months. And if that's the case and a trial settles, especially at the last minute, you can be left with a gaping void. I'm thinking of my daughter. She just lost her last baby tooth. And I don't know if you remember that stage where you lose a tooth and then there's this big gap between your teeth. That's kind of what it feels like when a trial settles, right? It's like, on one hand, it's actually quite a relief sometimes. On the other hand, sometimes it's disappointment. You really wanted that trial to go ahead, but there's a hole in your calendar. And yes, chances are you can fill some of that with backup, admin, recoup, rest, all that. But you're also going to want to find billable work to fill that void. So that can be a cycle that you are expecting. So when you're planning your calendar in advance, you might see that you've got trials. You might anticipate there's going to be a certain amount of workflow there. And you also want to think about, okay, if that doesn't go ahead, where else am I going to be getting work? And that might mean consistency beforehand, consistency in terms of billing hours before you get there. It might also mean making sure that your market hasn't dried up, that you're maintaining relationships with the internal and external clients that you have so that if you need to, if that file settles, then you've got other places to go for fresh work. So we're thinking about cycles. We're also thinking about seasons, right? If you know that your practice is really quiet during the summer months, it always has been, always will be, you want to take that into account, and maybe you take vacation during that time, but maybe you're also front loading a little bit when it's busier earlier in the year, for example, or maybe you can expect that in September or October, you're going to have a bit of a rush. So you just want to have that in mind when you're thinking about, okay, what are the challenges that I might face? One of them might be the cyclical nature of your practice. Now, another challenge that you might face, and this is a tough one, the work is there, but you're not doing it. This is tough, right? This is really tough. So there can be a number of reasons why this can happen. You might get distracted, right? You sit down to do your work and you have the best of intentions, but then you get interrupted. Somebody emails you, somebody walks into your office, there's an emergency that needs to be dealt with, there's a non-billable project that someone drops on on your lap. So there are lots of reasons why you can get distracted. So we might need to get on top of what those distractions are and help you manage those during the workday so that you are getting your work done. Procrastination, we talked a little bit about that. That can be a real time suck. Not only are you not getting your work done, but you're spending time pushing it off, and that doesn't feel very good. And so if that is something that you're struggling with, let's talk about it. It could be that you feel overwhelmed. You've got the work, you know that you need to do it, but you don't know where to start. So again, maybe that's a form of procrastination, but you just don't do it, right? Because you don't know where to go. You don't know who to talk to. Maybe you feel like you don't have the right support that you need. So another place where you might not be doing the work is that you genuinely want to, but you don't have the support in place. If you have, again, I kind of use the kids at home example because I've been there and I know viscerally how tough that one is, where you genuinely want to do the work, but you also need to be present at home. And so you're torn a little bit that way. So think about what some of the big challenges might be for you in terms of, okay, I know I'll have the work, but there's a barrier to actually getting the work done. There's another category, which might be you do the work, you actually sit down, you do the work, but then you don't record the time. And there might be a couple of reasons for that. One might just be that you have poor timekeeping habits, right? You do the work, but you don't actually complete the end task, right? Of entering the time, or whatever language you use to describe the process of taking the idea or the capturing the time that you've spent in a record that goes into your firm's accounting software. So you want to make sure that you are doing that. And it is so easy to push off, especially when you don't want to do it, you don't like to do it. And so if it's just poor timekeeping practices, what can we do to prioritize that? What can we do to help you actually enter the time? Because you would save yourself so much pain. You would not be stuck with those end of month, end of year, hopefully not end of year periods where you're trying to reconstruct days, if not weeks of time. You know you're going to lose time that way. It's going to take longer to do, and you're likely going to reduce the hours that you spent as opposed to fully capture what you actually did. And it might be harder for you to describe it, harder for you to account for it. So that might be a reason, you're doing the work, but you're not recording it. Or it might be that you have really difficult feelings around recording your time. So I've worked with lawyers who've really struggled. And the reason that they're struggling, and I'm talking about struggling to enter their time, is because number one, you might feel like you took way too long on a project. You were spinning your wheels. The person down the hall would have done it faster. You can't really justify it, even when the work itself is legitimate work. So that might be a challenge, and that might fall into poor timekeeping practices. They might be related, right? Your feelings about not wanting to record your time might be a part of that. And then sometimes the reason you're not recording your time is because it doesn't feel good because there's not much there to record. And that feels kind of gross if you've had a long day at the office and you look at your timesheet or you look at your notes. I used to take notes in terms of how long I was spending on a task, and then I'd tally up the time and enter that time. And if it was really low number, it almost felt hard to enter. It's like, oh, really, is that all there is? And it's almost like waiting and doing it another day feels better. Like it's not quite as bad, but if you can do it in the moment, face the music, then it's done. You may still feel kind of crummy about it, but at least it's done. So there may be reasons why, you're doing the work, but you're not entering the time. And if that's the case, we want to address that problem head on so that you don't have to struggle with that for a full calendar year. Let's deal with that at the beginning of the year and make your life easier. And then I have an other category, and this is other reasons why you may not be hitting target. Lack of motivation could be one of them, right? Especially after trial. So there's periods where you might find that you're just not motivated, right? The work is there, but you're not doing it because you genuinely don't feel like it. And so, you might need support there, right? Support from somebody who can kind of pep you up a little bit. Maybe you need a bit of a break. Maybe you have something that you need to kind of, reignite the passion for your work. So, it happens. You might have, sort of on this motivation front, you might have a plate full of work that you don't want to do, right? You may be really dreading your work, and there might be a bigger underlying question there, right? Are you in the right practice area? Is this the right type of work? Like, can you get through this stage of your practice? But then maybe you start reaching for work that's a little bit different, right? Maybe it's not a different practice area, but it's the type of file that you're taking on. So you want to explore that a little bit. And then you might also have leaks that are just unique to you that I haven't covered here. They're things that happen in your practice and you know it's a leakage. And so what are those and how can we proactively figure out a strategy to prevent those? So that was step 5. And that's probably one of the biggest steps that you're going to take here is just troubleshooting where things can go sideways for you and then strategizing in terms of how to solve those problems ahead of time. And then finally, we're at step 6, and that is, we've made that plan. So now you're going to implement, you're going to stick to it. You're going to go through the months of the year, billing, recording, and keeping track of your time. And so just to quickly recap, you've committed, you've got your goal is clear, you have your systems in place, your approach is clear, right? Are you front loading? Are you having days where you're staying longer? What is your strategy to meet your target? You know what some of the challenges are for you that you might be facing. We have your systems in place in terms of time management, and now we're implementing. So here you can expect that you are going to need to be accountable. You can be accountable to yourself. You might need someone else to be accountable to as well. You're going to need that workflow to keep things up. You're going to be recording consistently. You're going to be monitoring your time. If you need support, you might have someone like me as your coach to check in with on somewhat of a regular basis. You might have a mentor at work. You might have your assistant help you with this. So you want to have that accountability as you go. You want to be tracking. Don't put your head in the sand because that's a really tough way to know if you're on track. Please don't put your head in the sand. Keep on top of your numbers as much as you can, just because that's going to help you see exactly where you are. And it's a lot easier to make adjustments as you go than it is to kind of get to a point where you're further into the year and now you're starting at a tougher starting point. So keep noticing. And then probably the most important thing here is to expect that you're going to get off track, that something might happen. You might go through a slow period. You might have something like maybe your kid gets sick, God forbid, or you get sick, God forbid. So there might be something that happens. And so you want to know that you can always bring yourself back on course. And a huge part of any goal that you're working toward, whether it's, a goal that feels hard or even just time management as a goal, we know you're going to fall off track. We know that systems that work for you today, chances are they're not going to work for you tomorrow. And so there may be a continued need for you to adapt and adjust and adapt and adjust. And that is totally fine. What I'd love for you to be practicing is the art of getting back on track. So if you find yourself falling off track, that is okay. You get back on track. You have a slow day on a Monday. That's okay. You've got Tuesday where you can recommit, refocus. So we are going to practice getting back on track because it's that consistency that is ultimately going to lead you to reaching your goal at the end of the calendar year. And finally, reward yourself. So as you do these steps, as you hit your hours day to day, as you see yourself progressing, as you see the number accruing, give yourself rewards, whatever that looks like for you. Celebrate yourself, pat on the back, tell yourself verbally you're doing a great job, whatever it is. Acknowledge the work that you're doing because it's so easy for us to just rush through the day and not appreciate what we've just done. But give yourself a moment, give yourself a few seconds, even just to say, I did a good job today. Like I really did this. Or maybe you didn't meet the number, but you did meet a number. And tomorrow you're building, you're learning, you're going to do even better. So with that, I am going to celebrate you. I'm going to send you off into the world beginning of January. If you're listening to this episode when it goes live, if you're listening to it later, great. In fact, if you are listening to it in January and you find that by June, maybe things are feeling a bit stale, maybe you're a little bit off track, come back to this episode, come back and re-listen and recalibrate. You can do this anytime. It doesn't have to just be in January. And if you know somebody and they are struggling, maybe they're struggling a year from now or 2 years from now, come back to this episode. These principles aren't going anywhere. And what I would love for you, for people who are close to you, for anybody who is trying to keep on track of their billable targets, these are all strategies. These are all ways for you to do that. So with that, I'm going to thank you for joining me here today. It has been such a pleasure. And I wish you every success in the new year, including your billable hours, but also everything else that you are hoping for this year. So thanks again for joining me. I am excited for our year together, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. Bye for now. If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to miss an episode, subscribe and follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you haven't already, please leave a rating and review. Your feedback will help me create a podcast that's tailored to your needs and goes straight to the heart of what matters to you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. If you want more information, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com. See you next week.